Hey and welcome to my channel. I'm Alex and this is my review of Jess Franco's film Count Dracula. I'm not a massive fan of Dracula as a character. I didn't really enjoy the classic novel and the Hammer horror films I did see, which was the first Dracula and then the one where Van Helsing and Dracula transported into like the swing in London. Neither of those films really blew me away, but when it comes to Count Dracula, it's a very special film because we see Jess Franco trying to sit between like multiple chairs. There isn't really one direction he's trying to take, but he's actually pulling the film in like 5 separate directions. I think the first impression anybody has of that film is that it's a bit of a patchwork situation. It's very evidently stitched together from stuff that's shot across different seasons and different locations. Some scenes stick out where it's almost like a tropical quality with lush greenery, and there is even birds on the soundtrack which sound like jungle birds. And then other scenes are very blatantly shot in the dead of winter somewhere further up north in Europe with bare trees and grey skies. So there is that typical Jess Franco clash where continuity isn't really such a major concern. And what is the major concern with this film? I've seen Count Dracula a couple of times, and I think the first time was a while ago now. That was when Dark Sky brought out the DVD, and I think at the time they framed it as like a widescreen 16:9. I can't quite remember, but I think it wasn't Academy ratio. What surprises me every time I watch Count Dracula is that it's shot in this boxy kind of format, like 3x4, which is atypical, I think. So one of the possible reasons is, I guess, maybe it refers to the classic silent German films. Maybe that's the reason, or perhaps it's just, you know, that's what was available at the time. So there are, I think one of the film's saving graces would be this there are some stylish shots which with the framing you get the idea how Jess Franco is trying to distance himself from maybe the poverty of his budget, the problems, the production problems, and he's trying to create very solid abstract images here and there by just placing the camera strategically. So that works to the film advantage. But then there are other scenes, often side by side with the nicer ones, where evidently he was in a hell of a rush and he's just swinging the camera and zooming in and out multiple times within the same shot. So that obviously looks like something from 1960s you know, cinema verite kind of television or report. It doesn't really agree maybe with the way the film is presented as this faithful adaptation of Stoker's novel. You know, there are quite good locations in Count Dracula, and they are filmed, I think the way the buildings are framed is probably where the film succeeds, but when it comes to actors, I think the film is in many ways, again, it's not a cast that really gels together very well, and at times there is even evidence that some of the actors weren't even together on set. So there is the magic of editing where the actors are shot at completely separate locations, which is a practice I think Jess Franco adopted from his days assisting to Orson Welles, who was really quite proficient at that in all of Welles's European productions. And some of the really I think renowned Jess Franco actors all pop up in Count Dracula, such as Soledad Miranda, which I think it was maybe her first or second time working with Jess. And there is also Paul Miller and Jack Taylor, who are both Jess Franco veterans. or they would become Jess Franco veterans soon after this production. But I have to say, none of them have the role in Count Dracula, which I would say is a standout. I think all of them wear their period outfits with dignity, and they do the job, but none of them really shine, I don't think. So I could definitely see that Christopher Lee was more fun to watch in Jess Franco's Eugenie, with the same producer, with Harry Alan Towers, and I think Paul Miller is a lot more fun to watch in Nightmares Come at Night, or pretty much in any of those films he made immediately after Count Dracula with Jess Franco, such as Eugenie de Sade. I think one of the good things that came out of Count Dracula eventually would be Jess Franco's a lot less restrained film, which is Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein, which I previously reviewed on this channel. Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein recycles some of the same locations, possibly even a few props, maybe candlesticks are the same. And at the same time, it's a lot more consistent because as I said, Count Dracula has this patchwork feel to it, where some moments are epic and grand and ambitious, whereas others are like throwaway and madly rushed. Whereas Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein is completely haphazard and rushed all the way. It's such a gleefully cheapskate and absurd ball of fun. So it's a film where I think Jess Franco's maniacal joy in just filming and cutting and running and doing numerous setups per day shines, and it's this glorious moment where Jess Franco embraces, I think, his own obsession to a much higher degree than back with Alan Towers on Count Dracula. Evidently he was still restrained by having those major stars on at least some shooting days, and it was obviously a production where Harry Alan Towers probably was breathing down his neck too much, and I think this may have been one of the reasons why Jess Franco then parted ways with Harry Alan Towers' production company, which up to that point was his probably most prestigious backer and allowed him, films which would gain distribution, however marginal, in most major territories, at least in Europe. And Count Dracula also benefits from the score by Bruno Nicolai, which is a lush score, and if you close your eyes and just listen to the music, you can picture a much more impressive film with a larger scale, because the music is sweeping and has that grandeur which the visuals do not back up in any way. So in a way, maybe Count Dracula is not a bad movie to start with if you're new to Jess Franco, because maybe the character of Dracula and the presence of Christopher Lee can be an anchor for somebody who feels more at home with the original Hammer horror mythology, or Christopher Lee as this arch villain of 20th century European cinema one way or another. So that could be a good sort of gateway Jess Franco film, because it also doesn't spare you the problematic, because once you get into Jess Franco, you have to come to terms with the poverty of means and the lack of consistency. Like, however much his films succeed, there is always major flaws as well, which betray his being an impatient person, somebody who was always rushing onto the next idea and was hardly bothered about achieving 100% quality on a shooting day. So there is that aspect to it. Again, this music by Bruno Nicolai I just mentioned would then be proposed again, recycled, at least some of it, in Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein, where it would be also mixed with cues from Jess Franco's Justine movie, and it would provide an amazing score for that Monster Mash film, which has its own crazy magic with some exteriors shot apparently in Portugal, and then most of the interiors, I believe, are in Spain. So Count Dracula is a film I don't really turn to very often, because to me it starts on a, you know, I like the opening credits with those atmospheric shots of like the castle in the winter feel to it, but as soon as I see Fred Williams, I just sort of, I never saw him as a capable protagonist in any of those Jess Franco films he's been in, and especially burdened with this period outfit and having that very thankless role to play. I wouldn't list Fred Williams as a charismatic actor under any director, but playing that boring guy, Harker, who's always on the receiving end of everything, really brings his limitations as an actor to, you know, to the fore. And I think also his moments like his dinner with Christopher Lee, I think, you know, Christopher Lee has his own kind of a stiffness to him, which is this kind of aristocratic, theatrical, actor kind of bearing, whereas Fred Williams is just inexpressive. And to have them face off, there isn't really any dynamic then, because there's just, you know, they're both sort of backing away from each other in you know, as far as acting goes. This is the feeling I get. Also, I think the film builds up very way too slowly to, you know, to some action. Like the first 20 minutes, yes, there are atmospheric moments, and yes, there is that attempt to be faithful to the novel, but is it really worth it if there isn't any major incident up to that point? Like, we all know the Dracula story, so why don't we cut to the chase? I mean, for me, the film would have been better off had it begun with that there is a beautiful shot of like the castle gate, and Johnson Harker knocks on the gate and it slowly opens, and first we see the candlestick, and then Christopher Lee with his white mustache sort of pops into the frame. And this is where I think the film, had it begun there, it would have been more bearable. Whereas by then I'm always already kind of tired, and then there is that whole nighttime adventure thing where we're in this very, very fake looking set, and there is an attack by a bat, which is the fakest bat I've ever seen, probably. And this is where usually I always feel demotivated. I'm like, am I to watch this film out of fidelity to Jess Franco, or am I just going to switch it off? Because just the way it's edited as well, there just wasn't a time to, you know, put those pieces together with a bit more care, so there would be some kind of a dynamic there. So it's a film which is assembled more or less, stitched together, but it doesn't flow.